Welcome to Momma Move's podcast, where we focus on identifying barriers, removing barriers, and breaking through so that we can be who God has created and formed us to be, do what God has called us to do, and go where God has planned for us to go. I am your host, LaQuisha Williams. Let's get moving in our minds so we can move in our bodies. The Lord wants us to see exactly who He is in our lives. He wants us to see His character, His ways, how He does things, and His roles toward us as His children. And He does it through the journey that He takes us through, the path that He takes us through. And in that journey, in that path, there are circumstances and situations, there are valleys and wildernesses. And in those places, is where we learn who He is to us. Is where we learn that He's a provider. It's where we learn that He's a protector. It's where we learn that He's a healer. We learn that He's really in control, that He's El Shaddai, He's God Almighty. It is in those places that may be difficult for us and may not feel good, where He's able to show His hand mighty and strong. And sometimes we don't want to deal with the things that make us feel bad, the things that make us feel down, the things that don't feel so good. But it is in those places where we're able to see the goodness of God. And that's not the only place where we are able to see the goodness of God. When it comes to character, when it comes to really walking this thing called life out, there's some things we're gonna have to walk through. There's some things that we're gonna have to endure, and it will make us stronger. It will put us in a place where we have more wisdom, we have more knowledge, we have more discernment. We can maneuver through life a little more differently than we have before, when we were maybe a little younger in our faith, and we're able to turn around and help other people uh, that are coming along too, to walk through the valleys and the storms and the wildernesses and the things like that as well. I find that there's this awkward space between being in bondage and walking in total and complete freedom daily, where you come out of bondage, but you have to learn how to walk in freedom. And so there's that in between time. And my pastor, I love the way she puts it. She said, in the meantime, and it's it's that time in between, where it can be awkward, where it can be a struggle, where it can be hard. Um, Not saying that the bondage was not hard, but when things are revealed to you and we have awareness that this is where I am and this is bondage, and we make that choice to come on over and say, you know what, I want freedom, and we step out of bondage, and we're continuously making the choice that we're not going to be in bondage, and we are making the choice that we're going to walk the way of freedom. There is this space where now we have to learn and we have to grow, and in that place, it's not easy, it's not a breeze, it's not something that we can just walk through without having to deal with things, be confronted by things and people and behaviors. We're going to have to walk through the things in order to be able to walk in freedom, because we have to learn how to walk in freedom. We have to learn how to continue to walk in who God says that we are without going back to where we were. In this place, in this in between time place, it is important for us to really cling to God, because it is God that walks us into freedom and takes us out of bondage, delivers us out of bondage. It is Him that has the power to do these things. It is Him who has sent His Son to sacrifice His life so that we can be free, so that we can live in freedom and that we can have life. And so it is Him who's going to walk us through this thing and help us to work out this salvation. It is Him who's going to do it with us and for us. And I'm not saying for us as if we do nothing. Him doing it with us and for us as we walk and do the things that He tells us to do, and do the things that obeys His commands, that obeys the things that He says. And so in this between time, there's this place where we just don't know. And it's important for us to cling to the Lord, because He's the one who knows, and He's the one who's going to teach us how to walk in freedom. He's the one who's going to teach us how to not go back. And if we are not careful to cling to the Lord, if we're not careful to abide and stay close, we can find ourselves going back to a place that was familiar, but a place that's not really good for us, a place that we once were but got out of, a place that we fought to get out of, a place that we decided we will no longer be. Now, of course, this reminds me of the Israelites and how they came out of Egypt. They went into the wilderness to get to the promised land. The wilderness was in that between time. Egypt was the bondage, and the promised land was walking in freedom. And so they cried out to the Lord. They wanted to be free. They made the decision to be free. It was a whole process to get them, to actually get them out and lead them into the wilderness. There were plagues. There were so many things going on and was happening. And God, when God showed up, he was showing them even then. He was showing them his character. He was showing them his power. He was showing them how he does things. And even when they were still in bondage, when they were in Egypt. And then once they got out of Egypt and they started to walk and head in the way of the wilderness, there was this space, right? And so I say that God's desire is for us to walk in freedom. His desire is for us to see who he is in the places that may not be so desirable, so we understand who he is to us, so we can live in freedom and we can know the wisdom and the knowledge that he instilled to us and that he already knows. He just wants us to get to a place where we believe and we trust. And so there's a place I was reading in Exodus, and there was this place that I read, and I want to read it because I feel like it is very important when we're reading about the story of the Israelites and their journey and what happened and why they weren't able to make it to the other side and how did they get out and all the different things that we may have questions about. There was one particular thing that stood out to me. Well, there was many things that stood out to me, but this one particular thing I want to read that stood out to me that just explains God's heart, his character, but his will for the Israelites in this time and him knowing them, and understanding how this works. And so Exodus chapter 13, verses 17, and then I'll read down 18 as well. And so this is the wilderness way. And it says, then it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by way of the wilderness of the sea, of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt. And so, even in the way that he led them out was strategic. He made them go around another way, even though they could have went one way. That doesn't mean that that way was good for them. It wasn't saying that that way was bad. The way just wasn't good for them. Why? Because obviously God knew that when they would encounter something that wasn't desirable, which it says war, if he knew that if they encountered something that wasn't desirable at that fresh time, the time where they were just walking out of Egypt to get into the wilderness in order to get over to the promised land, they were just walking out and they were being led. He knew that at that delicate time, that in order to keep them moving forward and for them not to go back, that he had to lead them around a certain way. And when you think about that way and you go to the part where they talk about the red parting, Moses parting the Red Sea, and how Pharaoh and his men was there, and then on one side, and then on the other side you had the sea, and so they were stuck in between a rock and a hard place. They didn't have anywhere to run and to turn. And in that places where they seen God's hand in their life, in that places where they seen a miracle happen, and they needed to see that to keep them going. Sometimes we're walking in this journey and we're feeling like, man, it's always something. I'm stuck in between a rock and a hard place. And it does not feel good. By any means, I'm not saying that these things feel good. But what I am saying is that it'll be so much better for us, and I'm saying us because I'm talking to myself, for us to really remember moments like this in the word, where and remember moments where God has showed up. Because even before this time, before them being in between Pharaoh and his men in the sea, they had already encountered many things that God did with the plagues and all that. That was proof that God had their back and that God came for them and heard their cry and protected them in the midst of all that stuff. They knew. And so they had a level of faith and believing. They wanted to go out. They knew God had their back. They had enough faith to move forward with Moses. They had enough faith to walk the way of the Lord. And so there's constant reminders that we have through this journey of how God showed up in our lives. And it's so important that we go back and look at those things, because we can end up in a place where we feel so tired, so defeated, so depleted, spiritually weak, so many different things. And it may be true that we are tired, we are weak, and all the things. And we're in a place where we're in between a rock and a hard place, and we don't have a choice. And in that moment, we're having thoughts that we want to give up, but we don't have a choice. And so our only option is to lean on the Lord. But there's also even times where we do have a way out, because the way out is to go back. Our thinking, should I say, in our thinking, we want to go back. But like we just read, God knows how to lead us out and take us in a way where we can't go back. But there's times where we choose and we can go back. But technically we can't, because time changes, right? We can't go back in time. There may be different behaviors we may go back to, different thoughts we may go back to, whatever that may be, but it will never be the same, because God took us out of something. We made the choice. He showed us things. He showed us his power, his love, his faithfulness, his consistency, all the things. And so it won't be the same as it was before. The Israelites made a decision to follow Moses. They made a decision to walk in the way of freedom. They made the decision to step out of bondage. And in their decision, there was many things that they were going to have to face. They were walking into unfamiliar territory. They were walking into the wilderness, and they had to trust God. They had to cling to him. And this is probably something they never done before. They had to rely on God to show up daily to survive, literally daily to survive. And I don't want to discount how hard that may have been, because I know sometimes we may look at the scriptures and be like, the Israelites, they were disobedient and all these things. And they were, and they were punished for it. But at the end of the day, God loved them too, because he got them out of Egypt and he protected them and he did all the things that he did. And so just thinking about how they may have felt and what they may have been going through at that time, I know it was hard. It was hard to train their mind to think that we have to trust God every day. Before, this is what we were doing, but now we don't have nothing, and we have to just trust God to give us what we need every single day when we don't see the things, when we don't have the things. This is so unfamiliar. What was supposed to take a short amount of time took years for the Israelites, because they just couldn't get their minds renewed to the place where they can trust God and they can continue, and that God would make sure that everything would be okay and provide their every single need. They were struggling mentally. When you come out of bondage, when you come out of slavery, you're not going to just automatically, your mind is just not going to automatically change. It has to continually be renewed by the word. It has to continue to be renewed by God. And so they obviously were struggling for a long time. Now, I don't think it should take 40 years, but that's the reality of what this story is. And to be honest, that's the reality of some people's lives. And I don't think we should take that lightly, because that shows us that if we continue to remain in a place of disobedience, if we continue to remain in a place where we don't know how to slow down and actually cling to the Lord, we can be in that same mindset where we face troubles in life and our mind goes back to bondage, and we don't know how to move forward to the promise. We don't know how to move forward to walk in freedom, because our mind is not being renewed because we're not clinging to God and abiding and trusting. The Israelites was focusing on what was, and they were afraid of what is, what was in that moment. And their minds automatically went back. And I want to just read a couple places where uh, the Israelites, they went back in their mind, right? And so because they went back in their mind, they also went back in their mouth. Exodus 16:3. And this is just a couple because the Israelites did a lot of complaining, we know. And so Exodus 16, it says, if only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned. They There we sat around pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted. Let me read that again. Exodus chapter 16, verse 3. It says, if only, and this is in the NLT translation, it says, if only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned. There we sat around pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted. But now you have brought us into this wilderness to starve us all to death. Now, of course, this was in a place where they weren't eating, they didn't have food. And Moses had to reach out to the Lord to make sure they got it. But the Lord was going to provide it, and He did. But because they had a little burn in their stomach, they was going through some trials and tribulations. They was in the wilderness. They was facing some circumstances and problems. That pressure made them go back in their minds and then back in their mouths. And so then they start speaking. Only if we would have stayed there. If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, it would have been better but we would have been better off. At least they had pots filled with meat and bread. So they rather had been back there and got killed. They rather been back there because it was familiar to them. They knew how they were going to eat. Even though they were in bondage and they cried out to the Lord because they were suffering, it was familiar to them. When you choose familiar over safety and you choose familiar over freedom, and in that familiarness, I don't even know if that's a word, but in that familiarness, there's slavery, there's bondage, there's you're not safe. Like there's all these things going on, but because it's familiar to you, you rather choose that because you need some sense of control to feel okay. You need some sense of, okay, I need to know in order to feel okay. Sometimes we can be in the most safe place, but because things are unfamiliar to us, we feel like we're not safe. We feel like we're in danger. We feel like we won't have what we need, and we don't have what we need because it's unfamiliar to us, because we don't know all the details. And that's so strategic of the Lord because He's trying to teach us who He is to us. He's our Father. He's our provider. He's our healer. He's our protector. These are all things that He was trying to show the Israelites. He's all powerful, all knowing. There's another place in Numbers that I wanted to read. And I'm just pointing out some places where I was reading because it stands out and it kind of just solidifies what I'm talking about and what I'm saying. But I advise you, and I'm gonna continue to read, but I advise you to also read, starting from Exodus, and just read through on how things were done, how God did stuff, the people crying out, how people were doing back then, just all the things, and try to get as much detail and notes and however you read, get as much as you can out of it because it is really good to read and learn. And so Numbers Numbers chapter 14 verse 2. Yes, and it goes down to like 4. It says, and all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, let us select a leader and return to Egypt. They wanted a leader. They wanted to return back to Egypt. They wanted to return back to their place of slavery. And I believe this was at the point where they went and sent spies to a land, and they went into the land and they saw milk and honey. They saw exactly what God said. But they also saw the people. They got afraid. They felt like they wouldn't be able to defeat these people, and so they went back and they lied to the rest of the Israelites and said some things to make them not want to go. And so I hope I'm explaining that right. I know I'm explaining it right, but I hope it makes sense how I'm explaining it. And so then we're at this point where the Israelites start to complain, and they're saying the things that I just read, which was chapter 14, 2 through 4. And they're saying how they want to go back. They want to go back to Egypt. They want a leader. This is what they want. Why? Because it's more familiar to them. They don't feel safe. They don't want to walk into this land and defeat these people. They don't want to do the necessary things that it takes to walk into the promised land. And I feel them, because some things can be really scary. Some things, being in the unfamiliar, can be scary and on its own. But actually walking forward and doing the things that God is instructing you to do can also be scary, because you're facing so much. And then coming out of bondage and your mind is still being renewed. You're facing these things while your mind is still getting renewed. And so by no means am I downplaying or talking about or talking down on the Israelites, because I understand their position, but I also understand what God was doing at this time, and He was showing them time and time again who He was, and He was leading them into freedom, and He wanted freedom for them, and He wanted them to be protected, and He wanted them to be provided for, which is why He did it, and which is why He showed them in the midst of it. They just had a hard time with accepting what God was showing them, accepting what God was giving them. And time again, God showed His hand, and they just couldn't get their mind renewed. I feel like I've been in a position where I have been the Israelites. Like, I have been, not actually them, but I have been like the Israelites, where I've come out of bondage. I've been delivered, right? And I'm walking into the promised land, but I'm in between. And I'm walking in between, and I'm learning, and I'm growing, and I'm going through the things, and I'm facing the things in the wilderness. And I've had so many moments where I wanted to go back, because things got so hard. The pressure was just pressing me. And even now, I still have moments. I've just had a moment the other day. Even now, I have moments where I feel so pressed. And I'm just like, man, I don't want to walk through this. I don't want to do this anymore. I really don't. And because things are unfamiliar and uncomfortable, it makes me want to go back to what's familiar and comfortable to me. Even though that place I fought to get out of, and I cried to God to get out of, sometimes I think about going back to some of those places, because it was safe, in a way of, I had control to know what was going to happen. Things were calculated, things were familiar. Compared to now, things are not calculated, things are not that familiar to me. And I am leaning on God, and I've been trusting God for a long time now. And I feel like I've been in that place where it's a daily thing, a daily process of Him providing manna for me. And every day I have to walk in life and just trust and believe, all while still dealing with bondage, trauma, brokenness, all the things from before. And it's not easy. And the thing that continues to be consistent with the word and with my life is that in order for you to walk in this place, in this in between time, in this wilderness, in the place between bondage and walking in true freedom, you you must cling to God. You must abide. You must dwell. You must stay close to Him. You must stay in prayer. You must be in your word, and not in a way where you're doing it as a checklist and you're doing it because you gotta. No, you're doing it because you get to. You're doing it because you need to learn. You're doing it because you're walking with the one that's going to help you. You're walking with the one that actually brought you out of bondage and is walking you into the promises that he has for your life. And so that's one thing that I have to continue to remind myself as. And it shows up practically in me just getting up and having silent time with him and just dwelling in his presence, me thinking about him throughout the day, me talking to him throughout the day, me seeking him on things, whether it be small things or big things, me getting into the word and reading about him and his character and what he's done and what he's doing and what he will do and all the things. um me being in fellowship and being around people to learn more about him and his heart and his love and the way he works and his character. It's me speaking his word. It's me speaking the things that he said about me and me remembering the things that he has done in my life and who he is and how he showed up mighty and strong in my life personally. It's a constant work of me continuing to keep God on my mind, to keep his word before my eyes and out of my mouth and in my ear gates. It's being intentional to continue to walk through life with him, understanding that I don't put him down. I don't just go read my word and then I go about my day. No, understanding that this walk is with him. And I think I lived a life where this walk was for him. And I missed the part that it was with him. I missed the part that he's doing life with me and I'm doing life with him. And this is what life is all about, literally. And so I want to just encourage a person who feels like they've come out of bondage and they made the choice to not go back and they want to be free. They want to feel freedom. They know they're free, but they want to feel free. They want to walk free. They want to experience freedom. That in between time is not created to be easy. When Jesus went into the wilderness, what happened to him? He was fasting for 40 days, 40 nights. He ended up encountering the enemy and being tempted. The wilderness is not created to be peaches and cream. It's created to help us. It's created to build us. It's created to teach us. And it's created to show us who God is, to show us who we are in him. And so abide, dwell, cling, practically figure out what that looks like in your life and start somewhere. You don't have to start sitting with God for hours. I know when I first, um, you know, made the decision to walk with God in my life, I started off with just listening to sermons on YouTube, and I started to hear conversations about certain things, and I got the desire to want to read the word, and so I started to just, do the word of the day, one scripture, and it led me to more and more and more and more, and I developed habits with God that I can enjoy to spend time with him. I'm learning more and more that I don't have to be a robot. Like spending time with God, a lot of times is doing things that I actually enjoy doing. Like even working out. Like you can spend time with God doing anything. Anything that you do in your everyday life, whether it's cooking, taking care of the kids, cleaning, going to the gym, at work, whatever that may be, you can spend time with him because he's in it all. He's with us. And so, yeah, I hope this helps someone. I hope that this helps somebody move in their mind so they can move in their body. I hope this encourages someone to continue to move forward in all that they do with God. I hope this encourages someone to get closer to him and understand that they are the needy and we need him. And I pray that you see the results from doing so. And so I am your host, LaQuisha Williams, and I hope that you have a beautiful, blessed, and prosperous day.